I tried a compressor technique that shouldn't work, and it turns out it kind of doesn't. I've been messing around with this strange technique that I've dubbed negative compression. It's not very good at taming dynamics, and it's definitely not how you should use a compressor, but it turns out it has a lot of cool sound design possibilities for ambient music. Hey, it's Marcus from Holosuite. One thing I really love is stumbling on ways to misuse instruments and effects, often in an unpredictable or a chaotic way. This is actually a technique that ChatGPT recommended to me as a cheap way to mimic upward compression. And it turns out it kind of sucks for that, but what did fascinate me was all the ways that it didn't work. And that's what I want to show you today. Let's dive into negative compression. So you're probably familiar with downward compression, right? That's the standard compression. So when the volume crosses the threshold, it will bring down the peaks of the track. But there is also an opposite to that, which is upward compression, where when the volume crosses the threshold, the peaks get raised, right? So I've been messing around with that this week. Here is a track I've been playing with. So the track I'm playing with today is 2 Out of Time by Mike Nigro from his Leaving Returning album on Oxtail Recordings. If you like what you hear, check out the link in the description. So here I've just added a bit of pretty aggressive downward compression, right? So you can see from looking at the graph here that it's pulling everything down as it's crossing the threshold. Here's the volume crossing the threshold, and here's the sound being pulled down. And the opposite way, I have used TDR Nova here because it has this wonderful feature where if you turn the ratio below 1:1, right? So up here you've got 1:1 and above, gives you compression. But if you go the other way, it gives you upward compression. It starts going upwards. So let's check that out. Right, you can see it pulling up. And you can hear that it's, when it hits those peaks, it's actually raising the volume, right? So this is a cool trick that you can use if you've got a track where something needs to pop out more. You can actually use the reverse compression. So this is TDR Nova, this is the free plugin. And if you get the paid one, you also get expansion, which works slightly differently. But I was messing around with ChatGPT and asking it about what other ways we can do it if we want more control, but we don't necessarily want to pay for a plugin, because unfortunately, there aren't very many plugins that do upward compression that are free. And it suggested something pretty wild. So basically what it said we should do is take a standard downward compressor. In this case, I've gone with Kotelnikov. This is the GE edition, but I'm not using any of the fancy features from it. It's just using the standard Kotelnikov features. So it said I should do a similar thing to what New York style compression is, which is where we do a really aggressive high threshold, short attack, short release, very high amount of compression, right? So I'll start off just listening to that. Right, so we're getting about 12 dB, maybe more, of compression. And then the next wacky thing it suggested we do is to invert the phase of that compressor. So if you're not familiar with what happens when you invert the phase of something, when it's being copied from the original. So here is the original, and here is the copy. And if I flip the phase, so I've flipped the polarity of the left and the right, it will perfectly cancel out the original, and you can't hear anything, right? So you can see it's playing, but nothing's happening. If I turn this off, suddenly it works. So the idea is that when we are using our compressor, there will be a difference between the original signal and what comes out, and that's usually represented by the delta. So if we play just the delta here, this is the part of the signal that's been affected when it's being compressed, right? So it's not the entire signal, it's just the parts that have been pulled down, usually the kind of peak material, right? We can hear the peaks the most. So basically what this does, by flipping the phase, it means that the compressor will now only affect that area that was in the delta. So it inverts what you would normally hear in the compressor. Instead of hearing the full thing as you turn it up, it actually goes the opposite direction and starts cancelling out part of the mix. Okay, so that sounds very complex, but what does it sound like in practice? So if I turn this on now, I've flipped my phase and I've turned this all the way down to nothing, right? And I'm going to start gradually mixing it in with the original signal. So here you're just hearing the original signal. Now I'm going to start turning it up. So at this point you start to hear something happening. So I'll just turn this off. Right? You can hear that kind of upward compression happening. Suddenly we're just getting the peaks and the rest of the signal is starting to be cut out. And then that gets more and more pronounced as we go up. Right, so we're at about negative 17.7 dB now. You can really hear it's cutting out stuff if I just turn it off again. All right, that's the standard. Right, suddenly we're just getting those peaks. But here's where it gets interesting, because if you keep turning it up, you start getting really weird things as the phase interaction changes. So let's turn it up. Right, now it's getting really pronounced. Then you start getting this kind of crackling noise. Then things start going inside out. And things start to reverse a bit. Then things start to get really weird. Now it's going backwards. And as we keep turning it up, it starts to get louder and louder as we go backwards. All right, until we get to parity, and then it just starts getting louder and louder. But the cool thing about this, right? I mean, great. This is not as useful as just using the TDR Nova, right? It's unpredictable. It gets pretty weird. It's probably very sensitive to changes in volume, but it means we can mess around and get some kind of cool, creative opportunities here. So I'm just going to start messing with it here. Might turn it down a little bit. I'm just going to start messing with it here again. If I start messing with the attack, I can get different effects. Mess with the threshold a little bit if I want. Right, so it starts doing everything in reverse, and so you can just mess around with that. I mean, you can automate that and turn it into something really cool. If you do it on a more kind of static mix, so I've got here one where I've just got, I'll just play the original track. Right, pretty static. It's got some swells coming up here. But if I start messing around with this one, here it's going to do some cancelling. So you get this kind of like inverse swell happening almost. And it kind of only brings out the swells. And this one, I think I've actually done it on the middle channel. So you could do it on just on the difference. So just on the sides. Just do it on the left channel if I want. Oh yeah, that's a kind of, there's these little pockets where it's just, things just work just the right way. If you'd like to try out this technique, I've left the instructions in the description below. Go check those out. And if you do end up using it in your music, please do share in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more kinds of content like this. And if you'd like to learn how to use a compressor the correct way, check out this video I made here. See you next time with hopefully some more weird tips on how to spice up your ambient mixes. Cheers.